This is One Sentence News, a daily podcast featuring 3 news stories with a sentence-long summary and 1 sentence of context apiece. I'm Colin Wright. This is a sponsored message. I've been using Anchor as my podcast host for a while now, and it's been a pleasure to use. Anchor offers benefits that most other hosts do not. It's free to use, but it also has a collection of tools that allow you to create a podcast completely within the Anchor website or smartphone app. They distribute your show to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all the other distribution channels without any additional effort on your part, and you can make money from your podcast without any minimum audience size. So you can use it as a more traditional podcast host like I do, but it's also got everything you need to start a podcast from scratch. If you're keen to give it a shot, download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. It's Friday, February 10th, 2023. Let's talk about the news. From Reuters, Everwind gets approval for North America's first green hydrogen facility. A Canadian-based energy company called Everwind Fuels has become the first regulator-approved green hydrogen producer in North America, following their securing of the necessary permits earlier this week. Those permits will allow them to break ground on a commercial-scale green hydrogen facility in Nova Scotia, through which they're planning to produce and export 200,000 tons of the gaseous fuel per year by 2025, before scaling up to 5 times that volume in 2026. Green hydrogen is the same as other types of hydrogen, but it's produced using renewable energy instead of fossil fuels, which makes it a rare, clean fuel type that can be used in situations where raw electricity stored in batteries isn't ideal, like for powering large trucks or planes or producing steel. And it is thus considered by many manufacturers in particular to be a fundamental but currently underdeveloped aspect of the burgeoning next step green economy. From Yahoo News, MSCI review puts India's Adani shares back in the red. Following a small bump in investor interest earlier this week, predicated on an announcement that the company would be repaying more than $1 billion in early loans, which was meant to reassure worried and fleeing investors, the value of companies in the Adani Group have continued to plummet as part of a larger sell-off sparked by claims that this collection of companies' prices have been artificially and illegally inflated by those in charge. This sell-off was started by a report from Hindenburg Research, which takes out short positions on companies they believe to be overvalued, then profits when they release the information they've discovered about those companies to the public. In this case, they learned, according to their report, that the Adani Group has been using companies they control in offshore tax havens to buy up their own stock, fluffing the value of those shares in the process. Those running these companies deny these allegations, and both Adani himself and the Indian government have claimed this is a false accusation meant to weaken the Indian economy. But investors large and small have been selling their shares in the wake of this divulgence, and the Adani Group has lost around $120 billion in aggregate value thus far, alongside a drop in its reported safety and value measures from stock assessors like MSCI. And from The Economist, Pakistan is at risk of default. A recent countrywide blackout and a less recent but still impactful series of monsoon floods last year have raised concerns that the Pakistani government could default on its rapidly expanding debt load. Pakistan's situation looks similar in some ways to Sri Lanka's, the latter of which recently defaulted on its debt, sparking protests that eventually forced the country's president to flee, as both countries rely heavily on imported food and fuel. Pakistan's situation was worsened by devastating floods that displaced about 8 million people and caused about $30 billion worth of output, though, and its annual inflation rate is up to about 27.6%, making life for everyday people increasingly fraught. Pakistan is also distinct from Sri Lanka and other countries that have risked debt default because it's the 5th largest country in the world by population, is consistently politically unstable, and faces persistent threats from local extremist organizations, and it's armed with nuclear weapons, all of which make this situation less of a regional concern and more of a global one. If you're finding some value in One Sentence News, consider leaving a quick review wherever you get your podcasts and/or sharing the show with a friend. You can find out more about this show or subscribe to the email version at onesentencenews.com. And you can support this and other related projects, like the Let's Know Things and Brain Lenses podcasts, at understandery.com.